The Hitcher is a road action horror film which was released in theatres in the US on the 21st of February 1986 and internationally on the 16th of May the same year. It stars Rutgar Hauer in the title role, C. Thomas Howell as Jim Halsey, and Jennifer Jason Leigh as Nash. With a minimal budget of just $5.8 million and a box office return of only $7.9 million, the film was a financial failure and received mostly negative reviews from critics during its release. Since its release 33 years ago, The Hitcher has gained a cult status and is regarded as one of the best road movies out there. Young man Jim Halsey is taking a drive away from Chicago to his owner in San Diego. It's dark, and he's driving through a thunderstorm. After a while he sees something which looks like the silhouette of a man. The man is at the edge of the road with his thumb out. Jim pulls over. The man comes closer and knocks on the passenger window. Jim opens the passenger door and says, "My mother told me never to do this." The man gets in and they drive off. From there on, Jim's world becomes a living nightmare. Writer Eric Red came up with the idea for The Hitcher from the band The Doors song Riders on the Storm. Red states that the element of the song about a killer on the road in a storm appealed to him greatly, as well as the cinematic feel of the music, that it would make a terrific opening for a film. In 1983, Red sent a copy of his script of The Hitcher to script development executive David Bombick, who was intrigued by the idea Red had pitched to him previously in a letter. The original script was not for the faint-hearted: an entire family butchered, an eye in a hamburger, a woman tied to a truck and pole, then ripped in half. There's also graphic sex, a decapitation, slashing, shooting, and car crashes. Bombick and manager Kip Ohem, of which both became co-producers of the film, found the original script to be extremely brutal and gory, but they also saw a level of challenge, intensity, and poetry in it as well. Both Bombick and Ohem worked very closely with Eric Red to get the script into shape for their boss, producer Ed Feldman, and his partner Charles Meeker. Feldman and Meeker liked the script, but were concerned with how they could translate it to the big screen without it coming across as a slasher film. Feldman and Meeker decided to come on board as executive producers. Ohem and Red spent a further 6 months reworking the script, which included removing areas where Ohem felt the violence was too repetitive. Still photographer turned cameraman Robert Harmon was given the script and told his agent he wanted to make The Hitcher as his directorial debut, to which Feldman and Meeker agreed. A couple of studios said they would make the film if Harmon was replaced, but the producers said no because they had faith in Harmon. Executive 20th Century Fox David Madden was given the script and loved it, but Fox wasn't comfortable with its theme and subject matter. However, Fox were interested enough to give the filmmakers a letter of intent to distribute the film, which would help finance the film. Once completed, the studio would reimburse them for the budget. In the end, Fox abandoned the project over budget reasons and ultimately saw it as nothing more than a horror film. Even Madden stated he would have wanted to shorten the film. It was eventually seen by Silver Screen Home Box Office, who liked it. Producer Donald Dubrow, who pitched it to Michael Fuchs, chairman and chief operating officer at HBO, as a Hitchcockian-type thriller. Fuchs agreed to make the film as long as the girl being ripped apart was written out, and some of the violence reduced. When it came to the eye in the cheeseburger scene, HBO wanted it removed, so Harmon compromised with them and changed the eyeball to a finger in the fries instead. There were constant negotiations with the script when it came to the girl being ripped apart. Eric Red and Mark Harmon refused to budge, stating it as a vital and pinnacle turning point of the film's narrative. The studio wanted her death to be softened by putting a funeral into the film, but the filmmakers refused to budge, and the studio eventually gave in. The death was left in as it was written, but was not shown in the final cut of the film due to being too graphic for audiences at the time. One of the film's producers claimed that the film's commercial failure was due to the lack of violence, that Nash's death should have been shown, claiming that her death is the main motivation for Jim in the final act, and that the audiences were cheated. Personally, I don't think there would have been any benefit from showing Nash's death. To me, there are times in films and TV where less is more, and The Hitcher is a good example of that. We never needed to see such a horrific death to have an impact on the film. Every time I see that scene, my imagination is vivid enough to fill in the blanks. The general consensus of The Hitcher is that its violence is too grisly and unappealing, with hardly any character development, and that the relationship between Halsey and Ryder is not totally realised or explained. Personally, I don't agree, but each to their own. The most intriguing part of The Hitcher is what is not explained. Where does John Ryder come from? Why is he this way? Why does he single out and toy with Jim for so long? And what are the dynamics of their relationship? All these questions are very interesting and never answered. That is the way it should be. Ambiguity and the unknown is more appealing to me, and it always has been when it comes to films. Explaining the reasons, backstory and their relationship dilutes a film like this. It's a road movie. All of these would slow the pacing of the film, regardless of how interesting they might be. Rutgar Hauer stated in his opinion the critics misunderstood the film, calling to Hauer as an allegory in which Ryder represents evil. Yes, it can be interpreted in that way, and I do agree that the critics at the time did misunderstand the film. To me, Ryder is a force of nature, and will keep killing until he is stopped. The Hitcher is a simple story, but it's done very effectively, with constant white-knuckle tension from start to finish. Rutgar Hauer is simply superb and perfect in his role as John Ryder, the Hitcher. Every time he is on screen, he steals it with such ease. He has great presence, gives an unsettling, very haunting performance throughout. Hauer is also known for playing rogue replicant Roy Batty in the 1982 sci-fi classic Blade Runner directed by Ridley Scott. Also as the terrorist Wolfgar in the thriller Nighthawks with Sylvester Stallone. C. Thomas Howell is very good as Jim Halsey, being pursued by the Hitcher. Howell shows so much talent in this film, his performance shows so much varying emotion and range throughout. Howell also starred in Soul Man, The Outsiders, E.T. the Extraterrestrial and Red Dawn. For me, he gives his best performance ever in The Hitcher, hands down. Jennifer Jason Leigh is good as Nash, the young woman Jim meets at the roadside diner. Leigh said she was drawn to her character because she saw her as believable and as a real person. Also for the opportunity to work with Rutgar Hauer again, as they worked together on director Paul Verhoeven's Flesh and Blood. Leigh would go on to show more range in films like Single White Female with Bridget Fonda. She gave one of her best performances in the Stephen King adaptation Dolores Claiborne as the estranged daughter alongside Kathy Bates, who played the title role. The soundtrack is great from start to finish and was done by Mark Isham. Isham is also known for doing scores like Point Break 1991, Marvel's Blade in 1998 and Crash in 2004. The Untitled track to The Hitcher is one of my favourites of all time. It's haunting, provokes the feeling of isolation and of a nightmare that will never end. I can't praise the film enough. It's a disturbing, thought-provoking tale of a young man being terrorised by a relentless psychopath, not knowing if or when his ordeal will end. With a career-defining performance from the superb Rutgar Hauer and the very talented and underrated C. Thomas Howell, plus a solid performance from Jennifer Jason Leigh, there is also great direction from Mark Harmon, very good action scenes, and a brilliantly unsettling score from Mark Isham. The Hitcher is a roller coaster ride from start to finish that never lets up the tension. There are so many great scenes in this film, but this one is my favourite.
How do you like Shitsville?
Don't you move. You stay seated right where you are, or I'll blow your brains through your ass.
The gun is empty.
Yeah? Yeah?
You never checked it, did you?
So help me, I'll blow you in half.
All right. Squeeze the trigger.
I will.
Please.
Oh, I will.
Because you can sure as shit bet I'm gonna squeeze mine.
Why are you doing this to me?
You're a smart kid. You'll figure it out.
The Hitcher was given a sequel in 2003, titled The Hitcher, I've Been Waiting, with C. Thomas Howell reprising his role as Jim Halsey, and with Jake Busey in the title role. In 2007, we got a remake, this time round with the very talented British actor Sean Bean in the title role. In my opinion, both films were not necessary in any way at all. C. Thomas Howell was wasted in the sequel, and Busey's performance was too hammy to be a threat. If I had to choose though, the remake is the better of the two, mainly due to Bean's performance, who is always worth watching, and there is a degree of tension throughout. In the end, you can't beat the original, which is one of my favourite films of the 80s, and always will be. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did and you are new to my channel, you can click subscribe and the notification bell, so you can keep up to date with my latest videos. Thanks very much guys, and I'll catch you next time.